Okay. Well, I think a good place to start exploring anything that you don't know a whole lot about is maybe just go to yeah, Wikipedia. I know it's kind of blasé and lame, but the best thing we can do is maybe get the Cliff Notes, and Wikipedia is a good place to go for that, I think. And then you can maybe do a couple other Google searches, and then from there, maybe you can go to the show notes in Wikipedia, not the show notes, the links in Wikipedia, and kind of branch out from there. So I think that's where I'm going to start today. Uh, First of all, thanks everybody for being here. As you can see on the screen right now, I've got a list of questions that may come up, and I'll start posting links and show notes, and then I'll post that on my website after. So once again, thanks for being here, and let's get started. Um, Before I go anywhere, I want to know that I have a very rudimentary understanding of MK Ultra. Essentially, what I know about it is um, it's a CIA program from the 50s and 60s that basically used LSD applied to patients to attempt mind control, and is ran by the CIA. I do know that something to do with the famous murder in California. Um, oh God, what's his name now? He has a swastika tattoo on his forehead. What's his name? Charlie something. Manson. Charlie Manson. And potentially something to do with the Unabomber too. I think I remember hearing something about the Unabomber being one of those experimented on. I think it was MIT. So maybe it has something to do there. So let's go ahead and just do a quick dive, and then we'll go from there. Hopefully the show lasts around an hour, and if we have time at the end, we'll address any questions, and we'll just go from there. All right, thanks for being here, all. So Wikipedia, MK Ultra. So here's where we're gonna start. Oh, look at that. So let's go here, open that. Here, bam. This is where we started, right? So show notes and links on MK Ultra. One, bam. That's where we started. Easy to do, right? Project MK Ultra was an illegal human experimentation program designed and undertaken by the U.S. CIA, intended to develop procedures and identify drugs that could be used in interrogations to weaken individuals, enforce confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture. Okay, so it wasn't just LSD. It looks like a host of other drugs that they used. And it wasn't just for mind control, it was brainwashing and psychological torture. Oh man, maybe that explains why Charles Manson was so screwed up if he was part of it. Psychological torture. Okay, began in the 50s and halted in 1973. Used numerous methods to manipulate its subjects' mental states and brain functions, such as covert administration of high doses of psychoactive drugs, especially LSD, like I thought, and other chemicals. Oh man, I didn't realize they used electroshocks, hypnosis, isolation, verbal, sexual abuse. Oh god, torture. Yeah, we know about torture. Preceded by two drug-related experiments, Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke. Project Bluebird? What are those? And Project Artichoke. Interesting. Subtopics, right? Project. It was organized through the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence and coordinated with the U.S. United States Army Biological Warfare, Biowarfare, huh? The program engaged legal activities, obviously, including use of U.S. and Canadian citizens. Well, Canadians. Damn Canadians. Over 7,000 American veterans took part in these experiments non-consensually during the 50s and 70s, and many of them suing later on. I think it's interesting. I was in the military, in the service, and I'm not gonna say experimented on, but I was just basically told I had to take all of these shots and boosters, and they basically just told us to run things. So I think it's always interesting you know, you give away certain rights when you join the military, but you know, I don't know where those rights start and where they end, because I mean, you're government property. You're still a human being who has God-given rights, but it's interesting. I don't know where that ends. Over 7,000 Americans were part of these experiments. MKUltra's scope was broad, with activities carried out under the guise of research at more than 80 institutions aside from the military. So, like I said, I think I'm pretty sure that the Unabomber was part of the experimentation in MIT, including colleges and organizations, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. The CIA operated using front organizations, although some top officials at the institute were aware of the CIA's involvement. So, front organizations is something that they often do to you know, basically funnel money and things like that, because I believe one of the tenets of the CIA is they are not allowed to do operations on United States soil. So I think if they were caught, you know, that's a direct, you know, a direct violation of the CIA mandate. So I think it's good to do CIA operations on U.S. soil. We're met with Crusade for Freedom. Oh, look. I think they're talking about MKUltra right here. Approved the first mind control study named Project Bluebird, which renamed Plot Archer. Same thing. Interesting. Look at this rabbit hole we just went down, Chad. Was involved, I think. Interesting. It's not really what I'm looking for, but it's interesting. Let's put this one in here because we took a look at this one real fast, right? So we give people the right links. But I think what I'm really looking for is maybe CIA mandate not to work in the U.S., right? Top 10 myths. CIA spies systems. Well, okay. Look at the link here, CIA.gov. Let's be skeptical here, guys. Not entirely sure if that's true or not. It's like the cat telling you it's not a cat, right? Hollywood has produced citizen spies and U.S. citizens. The CIA's mission is to collect information related to foreign intelligence, counterintelligence. See, this is what I was talking about here. By direction of the President's Executive Order 1981, in accordance with the procedures approved by Attorney General, the CIA is restricted in collection of intelligence information directed against U.S. citizens. Collection is allowed only for an authorized intelligence purpose, so they can, but only if it's for authorized intelligence. That's interesting. So the mandate doesn't necessarily say they can't work in the United States, but it has to be, it's allowed only for authorized intelligence purposes. Okay, so I wasn't right there. Interesting. Let's go ahead and stick that in the show notes here. 3. Bam. Got that one there in case you want to talk about it. Top 10 CIA. Maybe we'll go back here because obviously the CIA is going to be a big part of our MKUltra discussion here today, right? MKUltra was first brought to publication attention in 1975 by the Church Committee of the United States Congress and Gerald Ford's United States President Commission on CIA Activities in the U.S. So that's kind of directly what I was talking about with CIA operating the U.S., which I guess technically they can, you know, according to CIA anyways, with collection, you know, directed against U.S. citizen, only authorized intelligence purposes. So I guess this is authorized. It's interesting that this is exposed in the Church Committee, though. Let's open that one. Look at that one later. Church Committee is interesting. I know very little about the Church Committee actually, so it's an interesting topic. Dinosaurs work. Well, Matt, you know what? Dinosaurs feel like they were alive back in 1975. There's an interesting song by Hank Williams Jr. called Dinosaur, which I know how I feel sometimes. You should listen to the song someday. I'm a dinosaur, so hand me my hat. Talking about the Church Committee here, right? So let's put that as a subtopic. Maybe that's something we look at later. But stay on MKUltra topics. By the way, thanks for showing up, Matt. I appreciate it. Today we're talking about MKUltra and mind control. We are dinosaurs. You're not wrong. We are dinosaurs, and it's only a matter of time before an asteroid hits us and wipes us out. Allegedly, right? Also could have been global warming. Investigative efforts were hampered by the CIA director Richard Helms ordered that all MK Ultra fires be destroyed in 1973. Oh, so they tried to wipe it, but that was Church Committee happened after Richard Helms ordered that the MK Ultra files be destroyed. So I wonder what, if anything, was destroyed. That's an interesting subject. Church Committee Rockefeller Commission investigates relied on sworn testimony of direct participants. We all know about you know, testimony from participants, especially. It's interesting to think about that. Someone who may have been given psychoactive drugs, LSD, chemicals, electroshock, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse. Interesting what sworn testimony would be. I mean, technically, sworn testimony is, you're swearing on a stack of Bibles that this is true. But, if they had been given, any of these things, I wonder how much altered state they were in, permanently. Obviously Charles Manson and the Unabomber, weren't right ahead. Otherwise they would have done that, right? Don't know what they did, I should say. All right, in 1977, a FOIA Act request uncovered a cache of 20,000 documents relating to MK Ultra, which led to Senate hearings. Some surviving information was declassified in 2001. So I think there's a book that I heard on the Joe Rogan podcast. I think it was called Helter Skelter, right? I actually have it, just haven't read it. Helter Skelter book. Helter Skelter book. I saw your comment, Matt. Be right there. Yeah, here it is. I had this recommended off the Joe Rogan podcast. So basically, it talks about some of his, it tangentially talks about MK Ultra and how it may have affected him. Interestingly, Matt, I read that psychedelics were criminalized in part because of MK Ultra. Well, your feelings on freedom aside, I could certainly see that if LSD gave the impression that people went off and murdered people, it could be misconstrued. It's a good thing that it did, but obviously, psychoactive drugs affect people in different ways. So it's interesting to read that, Matt. I didn't know that. Maybe that's something that we'll be able to touch on today. So let's see subtopics. Questions from chat to address if time permits. So Matt saying psychedelics criminalized because of MK Ultra? Maybe. Also because you don't want to do anything on shrooms. So bad for capitalism. That's true. Yes. I mean, God forbid you grow your own mushrooms. Shrooms, psychedelics, using interchangeably. Sure. LSD. Also, I wonder, aside from, what you do on those drugs, because same thing with marijuana, I guess. You can grow mushrooms in your yard. You can grow marijuana in your yard. You can theoretically make LSD in a laboratory if you know how to do it. So, hard to regulate. Can't tax it, right? Background. All right, so we went through here. Background, origin of the project. According to Stephen Kinzer, I have no idea what it is. The CIA project was a continuation of the work begun in World War Era II Japanese facilities and concentration camps on subduing and controlling human minds. Oh man, that's wild. So, man, I forget the name. I knew this, but I don't remember it. There was a really, really violent and subhuman Japanese experimentation program. I wonder if it'll show up in here. I wonder if it's a root of that. I wonder what that's called. Japanese World War II experimentation. So it's like Unit something, right? Unit 70. Yeah, there it is. Unit 731. Yep. I wonder if it was a route of that. Oh man, we're going down the rabbit hole here, chat. Unit 731. Japanese Japanese experimentation. Interesting. Yeah, we all know about Nazi concentration camps. We all know about the horrible things that they did. Um, Interestingly, that's Operation Paperclip. If nobody knows about it, was the importation of Nazi scientists and other scientists who did experimentation during World War II into the United States to use their scientific knowledge. Operation Paperclip. Wow, MK Ultra goes deep, guys. This is another interesting. I don't know a whole lot about it. I just kind of know the cliff notes of Operation Paperclip. That's another good one, though. Facilities and Nazi concentration on subduing and controlling human minds. Kinzer writes that MK Ultra's use of mescaline on unwitting subjects was a practice that Nazi doctors had begun in the camps at Auschwitz and Dachau. Kinzer gives evidence on the continuation of a Nazi agenda, citing the CIA's recruitment of Nazi torturers and vivisections to continue experimentation on thousands of subjects, and Nazis were brought to Fort Detrick, Maryland, to instruct CIA officers on the lethal use of sarin gases. I wonder if that's Operation Paperclip. They didn't say it, but interesting. The Soviet Union also contributed greatly to motivation for this project. According to CIA Director Alan Dulles, fear of the Soviet brain perversion techniques was palpable. The CIA wanted to verse itself in this type of mind control to be able to recognize and use it in case of conflict with the USSR. Fear of the enemy ran rampant among Americans, especially upon the sharp increase in PTSD Korean War abuse. Yeah, we know about that. The damage incurred on these survivors was so severe that mind control was thought to be the culprit. Origin of cryptonym. Other related cryptonyms include Project MK Naomi, Project MK Delta. MK Delta was established to oversee the use of MK Ultra materials abroad. According to Church Committee, such materials were used on a number of occasions. Alright, thanks Matt. Appreciate you being here. I'll be on for another 45 minutes or so. And yeah, feel free to drop in. Appreciate you coming by. Smash that like button, follow. I appreciate it. Thanks, bud. Here we are. This project was dedicated by Sidney Gottlieb. Where were we? Nazi concentration camps. Yeah, we got there. Mescaline, right? What is mescaline? It's a naturally occurring psychedelic protoalkaloid of the substituted phenethylamine class, known for its comparable to LSD. So basically, like LSD or psilocybin. Okay, that's fair. Easy enough. I guess we went here, so we should reference it, right? Mescaline. Interesting. Origin of cryptonym. I went to that. Aims and leadership. The project was headed by Sidney Gottlieb, but began on the order of the CIA Director Alan Dulles, who Dulles International Airport in Virginia is named after, by the way. Its aim was to develop mind-controlling drugs used against the Soviet bloc in response to alleged Soviet, Chinese, and North Korean use of mind control techniques on U.S. prisoners of war during the Korean War. So basically, directly against the Soviet bloc. That's interesting. Got that. So you wanted to use similar methods. CIA wanted to use similar methods on their own captives and was interested in manipulating foreign leaders, such as devising schemes to drug fight Al Castro. Nice. It often conducted experiments without the subject's knowledge or consent. In some cases, academic research were funded through grants from the CIA front organization, but were unaware the CIA was using their lack on their work for these purposes. It's kind of what we talked about before. The project attempted to produce a perfect truth drug for interrogating suspected Soviet spies during the Cold War and had to explore other possibilities of mind control. Aims and leadership. So here we are. Several schemes to drug Fidel Castro. It often conducted experiments without the subject's knowledge or consent. Well, I'm sure. In some cases, researchers were funded through grants from CIA organizations. We talked about that. The project attempted to produce a perfect truth drug. We talked about that. Suspected Soviet spies during Cold War, and to explore other possibilities of mind control. Man, that's where the truth serum came from, I think. Subproject 54 was the Navy's top secret perfect concussion program, which was supposed to be suboral frequency blast to erase memory. The program was never carried out. Man. Subproject 54. That's wild. Subproject 54. U.S. Navy trying to erase memories. Some Men in Black crap. Yeah. There it is. Most of them were destroyed in 1973 border of CIA Director Richard Helms. We saw that already. It's so been difficult for investigators to gain a complete understanding of more than 150 funded research projects sponsored by MKUltra. Yeah, they just erased history there. The project began during a period of what English journalist Rupert Cornwell described as paranoia at the CIA, when the U.S. had lost its nuclear monopoly and fear of communism was at its height. Yep. CIA counterintelligence chief James Jesus Angleton believed that a mole had penetrated the organization at the highest levels. Oh, there's the paranoia. The agency poured millions of dollars into studies examining ways to influence and control the mind and to enhance its ability to extract information from resistant subjects during interrogation. So yeah, CIA is just funding money to influence and control and mind control. That's basically what it was. Some historians assert that one goal of MKUltra and related CIA projects was to create a Manchurian candidate-style subject. Huh. American historian Alfred W. McCoy has claimed that the CIA attempted to focus media attention on these sorts of ridiculous programs so the public would not look at the research's primary goal, which was effective methods of interrogation. So anybody in chat who don't know what the Manchurian candidate is, essentially it's a I appreciate that. Thank you, John Payne. Thank you, Chady. That's my goal, just become a reporter. No, I'm kidding. Just exploring some history topics that I thought were interesting and this morning, and maybe I do this more often. That's the goal here. So people who don't know what the Manchurian candidate is basically a sleeper agent. They basically program, and when broad strokes, when the CIA says a list of keywords, they basically go active. It's interesting. Yeah, it was a book originally. Interesting for anybody who wants to look at it here. Obviously, there've been a couple movies about it. 6. There it is. Manchurian Candidate, if anybody cares. Close that one. Talked about mescaline. We could probably close that one. Church Committee. Want to keep that one open. That's interesting. Scale of the project. One 1955 MKUltra document gives an indication of the size and range of the effort. It refers to the study of an assortment of mind-altering substances described as follows. Substances which will promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness to the point where the recipient would be discredited in public. So basically, want to make someone crazy enough to discredit them. And I wonder, remember I was talking about earlier, substances which will promote illogical thinking and impulsiveness to the point where the recipient would be discredited in public. It goes back to where I was talking about up above, the Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission investigations regarding MKUltra relied on sworn testimony of direct participants. So interesting that these two kind of go right against each other. Substances which increase the efficiency of mental, of mentation and perception. Mentation. I wonder if that's where like the word mentat from Doom comes from. What is mentation? I wonder if that's just like enhanced cognitive ability. Mental activity thinking. Yeah, that's all it is. Just like enhanced mental cognition. Materials which prevent or counteract the intoxicating effects of alcohol. Dose people and see if they can just counteract alcohol. Materials which will promote the intoxicating effects of alcohol. So enhance and promote. materials which will produce the signs and symptoms of recognized diseases in a reversible way so they may be used for malingering, etc. In reversible way. Huh. Materials which will render the induction of hypnosis easier or otherwise enhance its usefulness. Okay, so yeah, increase hypnosis. Substances which will enhance the ability of individuals to withstand privation, torture, and coercion during interrogation and so-called brainwashing. Alright, so they want to withstand brainwashing. Materials and physical methods which will produce amnesia for events preceding during their use. Yeah, like Rohypnol. Huh. Materials and physical methods. I wonder what the physical methods would be. Physical methods of producing shock and confusion over extended periods of time and capable of surreptitious use. Shock and confusion. Substances which produce physical disablement, such as paralysis of the legs, acute anemia. That doesn't say if that's like permanent or just like a temporary, like make them have, you know, go weak in the knees for a period of time. Substances which will produce pure euphoria with no subsequent letdown. Interesting. Well, that's an interesting concept. Pure euphoria with no subsequent letdown. Are they referring to, you know, just, you know, like when there's like a crash when you're drinking a real sugary drink, for example, you know, some of those energy drinks are just real sugary. You know, the crash after that, or are they talking about, you know, you're living in this perfect state and then you go back to normal reality. You know, is that a euphoric letdown? I would think that's probably a you know, state of mind. That would be hard to counteract that. Interesting. Substances which alter personality structure in such a way the tendency of the recipient to become dependent upon another person is enhanced. That seems like it's basically making someone codependent. A material which will cause mental confusion of such a type the individual under its influence will find it difficult to maintain a fabrication under questioning. A material which will cause mental confusion of such a type the individual under its influence will find it difficult to maintain a fabrication. Basically making it so they can't lie, I guess, right? Truth serum. Substances which will lower the ambition and general working efficiency of men when administered in undetectable amounts. Huh. Basically just making them lazy. I guess that was the idea. Maybe send over dose people in the Soviet Union and, you know, no workers unite, I guess. Substances which promote weakness or distortion of the eyesight or hearing faculties, preferably without permanent effects. Okay. I guess, was that like alcohol? You know, that can affect eyesight, right? Maybe interpretation too, hearing, I guess. A knockout pill which can be surreptitiously administered in drinks, food, cigarettes as an aerosol, which will be safe to use, provide a maximum of amnesia, and be suitable for use by agent types on an ad hoc basis. A knockout pill which can be surreptitiously administered in drinks, food, cigarettes, which will be safe to use, provide a maximum of amnesia. Just dose people and make them forget when the time comes. A material which can be surreptitiously administered by the above routes and which in very small amounts will make it impossible for a person to perform physical activity. Just basically drug them, right? Applications. The 1976 Church Committee report found that in MK Delta program, drugs were used primarily as an aid to interrogations. But in MK Ultra Delta, materials were also used for harassment, discrediting, or disabling purposes. Other related projects. In 1964, MK Search was the name given to the continuation of the MK Ultra program. The MK Search program was divided into two projects dubbed MK Often and MK Chickwit. Funding the MK Search commenced in 1965 and ended in 1971. The project was a joint project between the U.S. Army Chemical Corps and the CIA's Office of Research and Development. to find new offensive use agents with a focus on incapacitating agents. Its purpose was to develop, test, and evaluate capabilities in the covert use of biological, chemical, and radioactive material systems and techniques of producing predictable human behavior and/or physiological changes in support of highly sensitive operational requirements. By March 1971, over 26,000 potential agents had been acquiring for future screening. The CIA was interested in bird migration patterns for chemical and biological warfare. The CIA was interested in bird migration patterns for chemical and biological warfare. Subproject 139, designated bird disease studies at Penn State. Were they basically talking about drugging a bunch of birds and having them, migratorily distributed? That's wild. By March 1971, over 26,000 potential agents had been acquired for future screening. Are they suggesting that the birds were acquired for future screening? Man, that gives a good gives credence to birds aren't real. All of them. MK often was to deal with testing and toxicological transmissivity and behavioral effects on drugs in animals and ultimately humans. Yeah. MK Chickwit was concerned with acquiring information on new drug developments in Europe and Asia and with acquiring samples. So basically they just wanted to steal data, right? New information and new drug developments. Here it is. This is the I've never seen it do that before. Kind of wild. Experiments on Americans. Damn. CIA documents suggest that they investigated chemical, biological, and radiological effects of radiological methods of mind control as part of MK Ultra. They spent an estimated $10 million or more, roughly $87.5 million adjusted for inflation. I guess in regards to today's spending, that's probably not much money. However, they still spent $87.5 million, experimenting on people. Terrible. All right, LSD. Here's the big one, right? We all knew about that. Early CIA efforts focused on LSD-25, which later came to dominate many of MK Ultra's programs. The CIA wanted to know if they could make Soviet spies defect against their will, and whether the Soviets could do the same to the CIA's own operatives. Okay. Documents obtained from the CIA by John D. Marks under a FOIA in 1976 showed that in 1953, the CIA considered purchasing 10 kilograms of LSD, enough for 100 million doses. They could dose 1/3 of the United States right now. They considered it, though. Doesn't say they did it. The proposed purchase aimed to stop other countries from controlling the supply. The documents showed that the CIA purchased some quantities of LSD from Sandoz Laboratories in Switzerland. Okay, well, Switzerland, doing it overseas. Right. Once Project MK Ultra got underway in April 1953, experiments included administering LSD to mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and prostitutes, people who could not fight back, as one agency officer put it. That's sad. LSD to mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and prostitutes, people who could not fight back. So I wonder if they specifically targeted them because they could not fight back, or I don't know. In one case, they administered LSD to a mental patient in Kentucky for 174 days. They also administered LSD to CIA employees, military personnel, doctors, other government agents, and members of the general public to study their reactions. The aim was to find drugs that would bring out deep confessions or wipe a subject's mind clean and program them as a robot agent. Military personnel who received the mind-altering drugs were also threatened with court-martials if they told anyone about the experiments. Hey Wes, hey man, thanks for joining the stream. We're learning about MK Ultra today. We've basically gotten to the point where we kind of learned what MK Ultra was, and now we're talking about the experiments that they did on Americans. Um, it's pretty wild, actually. And I've got some show notes and stuff you should click on if you're curious about it. But if you don't know what MK Ultra was, essentially it was a Central Intelligence Agency program developed, the 50s to the 70s, that basically was trying to, experiment with drugs on people in an effort to basically counteract Soviet influence throughout the world. And this is kind of going through what they did. It's kind of wild, actually. I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't know this much, that's for sure. But, that's why we're doing it, Wes. The aim was to find drugs that would bring out deep confessions or wipe a subject's mind clean and program them as a robot agent. Military personnel who received the mind-altering drugs were also threatened with court-martials that told anyone about the experiments. LSD and other drugs were often administered without the subject's knowledge or informed consent. Kind of knew about that. A violation of the Nuremberg Code. The U.S. agreed to follow after World War II. Many veterans who were subjected to experimentation are now seeking legal and monetary reparations. Well, it's probably good. In Operation Midnight Climax. Oh, I think I heard about this. Midnight Climax. The CIA, they basically were operating like brothels and stuff like that. The CIA set up several brothels with agency safe house in San Francisco to obtain a selection of men who would be too embarrassed to talk about the events. The men were dosed with LSD, the brothels were equipped with one-way mirrors, and the sessions were filmed for later viewing and study. Another study. Yeah, sorry, boss. I'll be the one to take one for the team and review the study tapes for today. Yeah, my bad. I'll do it. Everyone else, you can sit this one out. I'll take this one. Oh yeah, Wes, brothels. Yeah, Operation Midnight Climax. See it. I'm reading it right here in the Wikipedia page. The CIA set up several brothels with an agency safe house in San Francisco to obtain a selection of men who would be too embarrassed to talk about the events. Yeah, wild. You'd be there. Good for you, man. Good for you. Would you be the one to take one for the team on this if you work with the CIA, just to review the tapes? We're going to study this one later, guys. I'm going to need a cubicle. A soundproof one. They told subjects they would extend their trips if they refused to reveal their secrets. The people under this interrogation were CIA employees, U.S. military personnel, and agents suspected of working for the other side in the Cold War. Long-term debilitation and several deaths resulted from this. Heroin addicts were bribed into taking LSD with offers of more heroin. Yeah, well, that kind of plays right into what they're talking about up here. People do not fight back, right? At the invitation of Stanford psychology graduate student Vic Lovell, an acquaintance of Richard Alpert and Allen Ginsberg, Kenzie volunteered to take part in what turned out to be a CIA-financed study under the aegis of MK Ultra at the Menlo Park Veterans Hospital, where he worked as a night aide. The project studied the effects of psychoactive drugs, particularly LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, cocaine, AMT, and DMT. What is AMT? AMT, alpha methyltryptamine, a breed of AMT, is a psychedelic stimulant and entactogen drug of the tryptamine class. It was originally developed as an antidepressant by workers at Upjohn in the 60s and was used briefly as an antidepressant in Russia under the trade name Indopan before being discontinued. Dosage effects. Neurologic side effects of AMT include agitation, restlessness, confusion, and lethargy. Physical manifestations include vomiting, mydriasis, jaw clenching, tachycardia, salivation, diaphoresis, sweating, and elevations of blood pressure, temperature. Whew. Side effects reported. Oh man. Let's put that one there. Never heard of AMT. That was interesting. DMT, everybody knows. It's a naturally occurring hallucinogen. The Office of Security used LSD in interrogations, but Sidney Gottlieb, the chemist who directed MK, had other ideas. He thought it could be used in covert operations. Yeah, that's basically what we've been talking about the entire time. Since the effects were temporary, he believed it could be given to high-ranking officials and in this way affect the course of important meetings, speeches, etc. Well, yeah, I would say it could affect courses of things if it puts you in a euphoric state. Coffee cup my daughter got me for Christmas a couple years ago. It says, "My dad's a blast." At first, everyone in technical service tried it. A typical experiment involved 2 people in a room where they observed each other for hours and took notes. As the experimentation progressed, a point arrived where outsiders were drugged with no explanation whatsoever, and surprise acid trips became something of an occupational hazard among CIA operatives. It's like just basically dosing people in their office. "Hey man, want a cup of coffee? No, not that one. Take this one." It's like dosing each other and then just take notes on it. Wild. Man, the CIA was a trip in the 60s. I mean, not that it isn't now, but adverse reactions often occurred. Well, no kidding. Such as an operative who received the drug in his morning coffee became psychotic and ran across Washington. "We're going streaking!" Seeing a monster in every car passing. Oh my god, I'm streaking and they're monsters. The experiments continued even after Frank Olson, Army chemist who had never taken LSD, was covertly dosed by his CIA supervisor and 9 days later plunged to his death from the window of a 13-story New York City hotel room, supposedly as a result of deep depression induced by the drug. Yeah, there's that euphoric state they were looking to avoid. According to Stephen Kinzer, Olson had approached his superiors sometime earlier, doubting the morality of the project and asked to resign from the CIA. Oh, well, that's kind of messed up. They dosed him. He went crazy. Or no, maybe it goes this way. He went to his superiors saying, "I don't think this is morally acceptable. This is ethically, unsound." Then they dose him and he kills himself. Red flag. But of course, this wouldn't come out until the Church Commission in 1975, if then. It could have been, when it was revealed in 2001, right? Some subjects' participation was consensual. In these cases, they appeared to be singled out for even more extreme experiments. Okay. In one case, 7 volunteers in Kentucky were given LSD for 77 consecutive days. Actually, I want to put this one in here. 6. Operation Midnight Climax. MK Ultra's researchers later dismissed LSD as too unpredictable in its results. Yeah, they gave up on the notion that LSD was the secret that was going to unlock the universe, but it still had a place in the Cloak and Dagger arsenal. However, by '62, the CIA and the Army developed a series of super hallucinogens such as the highly touted BZ, which was thought to hold greater promise as a mind control weapon. This resulted in the withdrawal of support by many academics and private research. LSD research became less priority altogether. What is BZ? Never heard of this one. Quinacridinol benzylate, an odorless, bitter-tasting military incapacity agent. BZ is an antagonist of muscarinic acetylcholine receptors, whose structure is the ester of benzoic acid with an alcohol derived from quinacridine. Effects he's looking for as a powerful anticholinergic agent. BZ produces a syndrome of effects known as anticholinergic tox syndrome. These include both physical and physiological effects, with the most incapacitating effect being a state of delirium characterized by cognitive dysfunction, hallucinations, and inability to perform basic tasks. The usual syndrome of physical anticholinergic effects are also present, including mydriasis, potentially to the point of temporary blindness, tachycardia, dermal vasodilation, xerzostomia, and hypothermia. The readily observable symptoms of the anticholinergic tox syndrome are famously characterized by the mnemonic mad as a hatter, red as a beet, dry as a bone, and blind as a bat. Damn. That is wild. Based on data from more than 540 cases of accidental atropine overdose and liver poisoning, the median lethal oral dose is estimated to be approximately 450 milligrams. Alright, we don't care about that. Not our purview today, chat. Okay, talk about this. Other drugs. Another technique investigated was the intravenous administration of a barbiturate into one arm and an amphetamine to the other. Oh my god. So one arm you're getting up, one arm you're getting down. Oh god. The barbiturate is released in the person first, and as soon as the person began to fall asleep, the amphetamine is released. Other experiments involved heroin, morphine, temazepam, mescaline, psilocybin, scopolamine, alcohol, and sodium pentothal. Hypnosis. Declassified MK Ultra documents indicate they studied hypnosis in the early 1950s. Experimental goals included creating hypnotically induced anxieties, hypnotically increasing ability to learn and recall complex written matter, studying hypnosis, and polygraph examinations. Hypnotically increasing ability to observe and recall complex arrangements of physical objects, and studying relationship of personality to susceptibility to hypnosis. They conducted experiments with drug-induced hypnosis with anterograde and retrograde amnesia while under influence of such drugs. Okay. Experiments on Canadians. Well, we're experiments on Canadians. So don't care too much about that. But they exported experiments to Canada when their British psychiatrist Donald Ewan Cameron creating of the psychic driving concept, which I found interesting. The psychic driving concept. Cameron had been hoping to correct schizophrenia by erasing existing memories and reprogramming the psyche. So, erasing existing memories and reprogramming the psyche. So I guess the idea is, schizophrenia. I don't know. I don't know enough. He commuted from Albany, New York to Montreal every week to work at the Allen Memorial Institute of McGill University. He was paid $69,000 from 1957 to 1964, which is the U.S. equivalent of basically $579,000 in 2021, adjusted for inflation, to carry out MK Ultra experiments there. These research funds were sent to Cameron by a CIA front organization, like we were talking about earlier, the Society of the Investigation of Human Ecology, as shown in internal CIA documents. Cameron did not know the money came from the CIA. Of course not. In addition to LSD, Cameron also experimented with varying paralytic drugs as well as electroconvulsive therapy, a 30 to 40 times normal power. Ooh. His driving experience consisted of putting subjects to drug-induced comas for weeks at a time, up to 3 months in one case, while playing tape loops of noise or simple, repetitive statements. His experiments were often carried out in patients who entered the Institute for Common Problems and Anxiety Disorders and postpartum depression, many of whom suffered permanent effects from his actions. His treatment resulted in victims' urinary incontinence, amnesia, forgetting how to talk, forgetting their parents, and thinking their interrogators were their parents. Ooh, that's messed up. During this era, Cameron became known worldwide as the first chairman of the World Psychiatric Association. Whoa, jeez. They awarded this guy, as well as both president of the American Psychiatric Association and the Canadian Psychiatric Association. Cameron was also a member of the Nuremberg Medical Tribunal. So this guy, let's put this in perspective, Chad. So this guy, who in basically 1957 to 1964 was a U.S. citizen, working at McGill University in Montreal, getting paid, from 57 to 64, over that period of time, $69,000, call it equivalent of $500,000 over that period of time, to basically drive from the U.S. to experiment on people in Canada. And in which case, during that time, he basically dosed people for weeks at a time, according to this, up to 3 months at a time. In some cases, playing tape loops of noise, simple repetitive statements. So, basically putting on a tape loop saying, birds aren't real, or, I'm your father, I'm your mother. Simple, just as an example, tape loops, simple repetitive statements. Those are simple, right? It's nothing complicated. So he did this, and his treatment resulted in, according to this, he was trying to, basically see what would come. I guess he was trying to correct schizophrenia, I guess, and reprogram the psyche. I guess is what he's trying to do, right? According to this, he was basically experimenting on people with postpartum depression and anxiety disorders, and the results of this were urinary incontinence, amnesia, people forgetting how to talk, forgetting their parents, and thinking their interrogators were their parents. And during this time period, he was the first chairman of the World Psychiatric Association and president for the American Psychiatric Association and the Canadian Psychiatric Association. Also, prior to this, from 46 to 47, he was a member of the Nuremberg Medical Tribunal. And right up here, we were talking about, the Nuremberg trials basically deemed that, this type of work was unethical. Yeah, the Nuremberg Code. Maybe it's none are the same, but I would think that the Nuremberg Code and the Nuremberg tribunals were somewhat tangentially related, and you would think that, wild. His work was inspired and paralleled by the British psychiatrist William Sargent at St. Thomas Hospital. During this era, Cameron became known. His work was inspired and paralleled by the British psychiatrist William Sargent at St. Thomas Hospital in London and Belmont Hospital, Sutton, who was also involved in the Secret Intelligence Service and who experimented on his patients without their consent, causing similar long-term damage. Well, I think that's basically what this happened. Sorry, I had to go explain to my kids to stop screaming. His work was inspired by who was also involved in the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, SIS. Look at that building. Looks beautiful. Who experimented on his patients without their consent, causing similar long-term damage. So basically, SIS and CIA were running these operations simultaneously. I'm assuming that they shared information like they always do. Don't know that, just making some assumptions here. No evidence, obviously, they don't even talk about that, but we've shared intelligence for ages, right? In the 1980s, several of Cameron's former patients sued the CIA for damages, which the Canadian news program The Fifth Estate documented. Their experience in lawsuits were adapted in 1998 television miniseries The Sleep Room. Okay. Naomi Klein argues in her book The Shock Doctrine that Cameron's research and his contribution to the MKUltra project was not about mind control and brainwashing, but about designing a scientifically based system for extracting information from resistant tortures. In other words, torture. The Shock Doctrine. Let's put this one in here. Shock Doctrine. 7. Shock Doctrine. And her book. Book by Naomi Klein. Even if symptoms feel mild, these factors can increase your risk of COVID-19 turning severe. So experiments on Danes. All right. Wow, there's a lot of stuff here. Interesting. I've never seen it act like this before. Have trouble like focusing. I don't know why it's doing it. Maybe I'm just going too fast. Experiments on Danes. I wonder if it's because I'm zoomed in. Maybe. Well, put it like this, and maybe anybody in the chat is trying to read too can help. You know, if anybody's there and maybe zoom in, zoom out, make it larger, something like that, let me know. Unlike the US and Canada, Denmark had a centralized population register allowing participants to be tracked over the course of several years. Yeah, okay. US psychologist Arnold Medic teamed up with Danish professor Finny Schulsinger to study schizophrenia progression in Danish orphans. So they're taking orphans and they're going to study schizophrenia. The project grew out of QK Hilltop and was later absorbed into MK Ultra. In 1977, which is after the Church Commission, or Church Committee, Church Commission. Let's clarify that. Church Committee, is that different than the Church Commission? Is that different? I don't know. That's a good question to ask. Church Commission versus the Church Commission. Are they two different things? I don't know. So it's actually the Church Committee, not the Church Commission. Okay. Good to know. Oh, I misspelled committee. Whatever. I think that's the point. Okay. That's probably something we just need to go deep on eventually. Interesting topics for next week. Subtalk. We got that on there, right? Okay. So let's close this search feature. We're here. We're in experiments on Danes. So the project grew out of QK Hilltop and was later absorbed in MK Ultra. In 1977, like I was saying, which is the Church Committee was in 1975. So 1977 is after the Church Committee. Schulsinger completed his doctoral dissertation on the project, but his MK Ultra had been officially declared in the US to have been discontinued with records destroyed in 1973. Schulsinger's thesis became a state secret. The children were required to undergo frequent and harsh mental health assessments for which there was no informed consent. In December 2021, radio documentarian Per Wennick discovered 36 boxes of MK Ultra records stored at a psychiatric center in a Copenhagen suburb, but when he asked for access, the center shredded the records in violation of Danish law. So they covered it up. They were experimenting on children, and they covered it up as part of MK Ultra. So the U.S. has a direct hand in experiment. The U.S., the CIA, and by extension the U.S. has a direct connection with experimenting on children, the Dutch, Canadians, and U.S. citizens, all as a product of the MK Ultra program itself, let alone, any other programs that were going on, arounding, before, after, whatever. This purview right now is just MK Ultra. Remember that. Secret detention camps. Oh God. In areas under American control in the 1970s. Why? In areas under American control in the early 1950s in Europe and East Asia, mostly Japan, Germany, Philippines, the CIA created secret detention centers so the U.S. could avoid criminal prosecution. Okay, well, in 1950s in Europe and still today, we have military bases in Japan, right, Okinawa, Germany, right, we've got a big Air Force base in Ramstein, somewhere else. In the Philippines, I know we have a military base in the Philippines. In East Asia, I feel like in the 50s, I feel like we had, well, I know, because my grandfather was stationed there, we had Greenland and Thailand. I'm not sure that's referring to as East Asia, but we've got military bases all over there. The CIA captured people suspected of being enemy agents and other people deemed it expendable to undertake various types of torture and human experimentation on them. The prisoners were interrogated while being administered psychoactive drugs, electroshocked, and subjected to extremes of temperature, sensory isolation, and the like to develop a better understanding of how to destroy and control human minds. I think that this is something to point out and say this is perhaps different from Extraordinary Rendition, right? But it's also very similar, being, state sponsored by the U.S. Interesting. So, if anybody's curious, what the U.S. has, I'll say reenact or reinstated, and I say that loosely because it possibly never stopped. Again, this is just the purview of, MK Ultra, let alone any other, crazy things. The U.S. has a history of experimenting and torturing people. Clearly, as we can see, MK Ultra. In 1973, amid a government-wide panic caused by Watergate, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered MK Ultra files destroyed. We knew about that. This is revelations. Chat. This is revelations regarding MK Ultra, which we may not have any bombshells here because we've been through a bunch of them, but here we are. In 1973, amid a government-wide panic caused by Watergate, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MK Ultra files destroyed. Okay, we knew about that. And in 1975, that's when the Church Committee was commissioned and started, exploring portions of this. Church Committee. So here you go. Frank Church headed the Church Committee in investigation into the practice of the U.S. intelligence agencies. There you go. Okay, pursuant to this order, most CIA documents regarding the project were destroyed, making a full investigation of MK Ultra impossible. So, we may not, if the files were actually destroyed and they weren't, I don't know, found in somebody's garage or private server or locked in a closet, cough, we assume that those files are destroyed and we'll never be able to understand the full purview of MK Ultra, which is sad. A cache of some 20,000 documents survived Helm's purge, as they had been incorrectly stored in a financial records building and were discovered following a FOIA request in 1977. These documents were fully investigated during the Senate hearings of 1977. So, Church Committee files ordered to be stored in 1973, misfiled somewhere. 1975, the Church Committee is formed. I don't know how long the Church Committee went on for. I don't imagine it's 2 years, but who knows. A FOIA request in 1977, these documents were discovered and they were investigated during 7 Senate hearings in 1977. So the Senate hearings in 1977 sound like they are different than the Church Committee. So I assume the Church Committee had come to its close in 1977. So this is another investigation. In December 1974, the New York Times alleged the CIA had conducted illegal domestic activities, including experience on U.S. citizens during the 60s. The report prompted investigations by the U.S. States Congress in the form of the Church Committee, we talked about, and by a commission known as the Rockefeller Commission that looked into the illegal domestic activities of the CIA, the FBI, and intelligence-related agencies of the military. Okay, so part of the Church Committee we should probably look at is the Rockefeller Commission, right? Rockefeller Commission. Different, but the same. In the summer of 1975, Congressional Church Committee reports and the Presidential Rockefeller Commission. So, interesting to know. So, the Church Committee was congressional, and the Rockefeller Commission was presidential. 2 different branches of government. Huh. It's also interesting because I believe, don't hold me to this, I believe that the CIA, FBI, I think that those fall under executive branch and not legislative branch. So, presidential, executive were investigating themselves. Conflict of interest, perhaps, but it's good that we simultaneously see the Church Committee, congressional. In the summer of 75, Congressional Church Committee reports and the Presidential Rockefeller Commission report revealed to the public for the first time that the CIA and the DoD had conducted experiments on both unwitting and cognizant human subjects as part of an extensive program to find out how to influence and control human behavior through the use of psychoactive drugs such as LSD and mescaline and other chemical, biological, and psychological means. Kind of knew about that, right? They also revealed that at least one subject, Frank Olson, had died after administration of LSD. We talked about that earlier. That was the guy that worked for the CIA. He worked for the CIA. He went and told his superiors that he didn't think the MK Ultra program was ethical. And then mysteriously, this guy jumps off the 13th story of his apartment. Or, jumps off the 13th roof and dies. 13th story roof and dies. Red flag. Much of what the Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission learned about MK Ultra was contained in a report prepared by the Inspector General's office in 1963 that survived the destruction of records ordered in 1973. That doesn't make sense. They also revealed that at least once, we know that much of what the Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission learned about MK Ultra was contained in a report prepared by the Inspector General's office in 1963 that had survived the destruction of records ordered. Okay, so what it's saying is there's a report written in 1963 that should have been destroyed in the 1973 order of destruction of the MK Ultra records, but this one survived it. However, it contained little detail. Well, if this went on until 1973, it's 10 years of missing data probably. So we still don't know the full extent of everything that went on MK Ultra program. However, in little detail, Sidney Gottlieb, who had retired from the CIA 2 years previously and had headed MK Ultra, was interviewed by the committee, but claimed to have very little recollection of the activities of MK. Obviously, why would they know about the activities of MK Ultra? I don't know. I forgot. Well, possibly because you were being dosed with the intent to forget information. I plead the Fifth Amendment. I do not recall. I do not know. I was drugged. I can't remember at that time. Yeah, sounds apropos. The Congressional Committee investigating the CIA research, chaired by Senator Frank Church, hence the name Church Committee, concluded that prior consent was obviously not obtained from any of the subjects. The committee noted that the experiments sponsored by these researchers call into question the decision of agency to not to fix guidelines for experiments. So, prior consent was obviously not obtained from any of the subjects. I thought they were saying some of these were voluntary subjects. Just been in my coffee, chat. My dad's blast. Cup tastes great. Thanks. Following the recommendation of the Church Committee, President Gerald Ford in 1976 issued the first executive order on intelligence agencies. President Gerald Ford in 1976 issued the first executive order on intelligence activities, which, among other things, prohibited experimentation with drugs in human subjects, except with the informed consent in writing and witnessed by a disinterested party of each human subject, and in accordance with guidelines issued by the National Commission. Subsequent orders by Presidents Carter and Reagan expanded the directive to apply to any human experimentation. So, basically what this is saying is, in 1976, President Ford issued the first executive order on intelligence activities. Part of that order, executive order, basically prohibited experimentation with drugs on human subjects, except without their informed consent, their informed written consent, and has to be witnessed by a disinterested party of each human subject. So someone who has no interest, quote unquote, in this needs to be witness to the experimentation going on. So I guess nobody with a dog in the fight, per se. And then orders by President Carter and President Reagan expanded that directive to apply to any human experimentation, not just with drugs. So meaning that we couldn't, saw off an arm without their, written consent and observed by a third party. Some hyperbole there, but example. In 1977, during a hearing held by the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence to look further into MKUltra, Admiral Stansfield Turner, then Director of Central Intelligence, revealed that the CIA had found a set of records consisting of about 20,000 pages that had survived the 1973 destruction orders because they had been incorrectly stored at a record center not usually used for such documents. Okay. So this is after the Church Committee, after the Presidential Committee. This is a 1977 another Senate Select Committee on Intelligence meeting where they found something. So the third one found these 20,000 pages that described the 1973 destruction. These files dealt with financing of MKUltra projects and contained few project details, but much more was learned from them than the Inspector General's 1963 report. Okay. On the Senate floor in 1977, Senator Ted Kennedy said, "The Deputy Director of the CIA revealed that over 30 universities and institutions were involved in an extensive testing and experimentation program, which included covert drug tests on unwitting citizens at all social levels, high and low, Native Americans, and foreign. Several of these tests involved administration of LSD to unwitting subjects in social situations." Yeah, we knew about that. At least one death, the result of the alleged defenestration of Frank Olson, was attributed to Olson's being subjected, without his knowledge, to such experimentation 9 days before his death. The CIA itself subsequently acknowledged that these tests had little scientific rationale. The officers conducting the monitoring were not qualified scientific observers. Yeah, well, we knew that. Well, they talked about it before. They just like randomly, drugging people in the office. Here, drink my coffee. It turns out it has a dose of LSD. Man. In Canada, the issue took much longer to surface, becoming widely known in 1984 on a CBC News show, The Fifth Estate. It was learned that not only had the CIA funded Cameron's efforts, but also the Canadian government was fully aware of this and later provided another $500,000 in funding to continue the experiments. So, to kind of go back to this one, that guy Cameron, who was part of the Canadian, the worldwide, where was it? The World Psychiatric Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and the Canadian Psychiatric Association. This guy, who we just said was paid $69,000 in 57, basically $500,000, 1921 costs. Then, sent from New York City to McGill University in Montreal, weekly to do this, was funded by the U.S. and funded by Canada to continue the experiments. So this guy basically got paid $1 million to do this work. This revelation largely derailed efforts by the victims to sue the CIA as their U.S. counterparts had, and the Canadian government eventually settled out of court for $100,000 to each of the 127 victims. Cameron died on September 8, 1967, after suffering a heart attack while he and his son were mountain climbing. None of Cameron's part of his involvement with MKUltra survived because his family destroyed them after his death. So, 1973, those files were destroyed, Cameron's notes, and the Canadian experience were destroyed. Damn. Alright, 1994. The U.S. General Accounting Office report. What is this? The U.S. General Accounting Office issued a report on September 28, 1994, which stated that between 1940 and 1974, DOD and other national security agencies studied thousands of human subjects in tests and experiments involving hazardous substances. Okay, well, we knew about that. That's not a big revelation. The quote from the study: "Working with the CIA, the DOD gave hallucinogenic drugs to thousands of volunteer soldiers in the 1950s and 60s. In addition to LSD, the Army also tested quinoclinidyl benzylate, a hallucinogenic codenamed BZ. Talk about that. Many of these tests were conducted under the so-called MKUltra program established to counter perceived Soviet and Chinese advances in brainwashing techniques. Between 1953 and 1964, the program consisted of 149 projects involving drug testing and other studies on unwitting human subjects." Okay, well, it's not a huge revelation. We kind of already knew that, right? Deaths. Oh, here it comes. Okay. Given the CIA's purposeful destruction of most records, its failure to follow informed consent protocols with thousands of participants, the uncontrolled nature of the experiments, and the lack of follow-up data, the full impact of MKUltra experiments, including deaths, may never be known. Yeah, well, we kind of figured that much, considering there's the whitewashing in 1973 of all the destroyed records, and then that camera guy's records got destroyed, and who knows what else. Misfiling clearly happened. Maybe we'll get lucky and someone will open a filing cabinet and National Archives, and voila, we'll find another 20,000 documents, but probably not. Several of those have been associated with Project MKUltra, most notably Frank Olson. We talked about that. Olson, a U.S. Army biochemist and biological weapons researcher, was given LSD without his knowledge of consent in November 1953 as part of a CIA experiment, and died by suicide by jumping up a 13-story window a week later. Died by suicide. A CIA doctor assigned to monitor Olson claimed to have been asleep in another bed in New York City hotel room when Olson fell to his death. In 1953, Olson's death was described as a suicide that had occurred during a severe psychotic episode. The CIA's own internal investigation concluded that the head of MKUltra, CIA chemist Sidney Gottlieb, had conducted the LSD experiment with Olson's prior knowledge, although neither Olson nor the men taking part in the experiment were informed as to the exact nature of the drug until the 20 minutes after its ingestion. The report further suggests Gottlieb was nonetheless due a reprimand, as he had failed to take into account Olson's already diagnosed suicidal tendencies, which might have been exacerbated by the LSD. I feel like I'm reading mixed information here. Okay, I guess maybe this is true. Maybe this is splitting hairs, but Olson was given LSD without his knowledge or consent in November 1953 as part of the CIA experiment. So I guess the CIA's own internal investigation concluded that the head of MKUltra, CIA, had conducted the LSD experiment with Olson's prior knowledge, although neither Olson nor the men taking part in the experiment were informed as to the exact nature of the drug until 20 minutes. So they were given the drug and then said, oh, by the way, this is LSD. So I guess that's his prior knowledge. The Olson family disputes the official version of events. Okay, here it comes. They maintain that Frank Olson was murdered. There it is. Knew it. Suicide. They maintain that Frank Olson was murdered because, especially in the aftermath of the LSD experience, he became a security risk who might divulge state secrets associated with highly classified CIA programs, although many of which he had direct personal knowledge. A few days before his death, Frank Olson quit his position as acting chief of Special Operations Division at Dietrich, Maryland, later Fort Detrick, because of a severe moral crisis concerning the nature of his biological weapons research. Among Olson's concerns were the development of assassination materials used by the CIA's use of biological warfare materials in covert operations, experimentation with biological weapons in populated areas, collaboration with former Nazi scientists under Operation Paperclip. There it is. Bam. Talked about up here, right? LSD, mind control research, and other psychoactive drugs during terminal interrogations under a program codenamed Project Artichoke. Oh god. Man, how deep does this rabbit hole go? What is this? Project Artichoke. Project Artichoke. Sounds very generic. Artichoke. Later, forensic evidence conflicted with the official version of events. Okay. When Olson's body was exhumed in 1994, cranial injuries indicated Olson had been knocked unconscious before. There it is. The medical examiner named Olson's death a homicide. And so he was murdered. This is what this is saying. The doctor's report indicates that he was clubbed over the head, then he committed suicide. Suicided, right? In 1975, Olson's family received a $750,000 settlement from the U.S. government, formal apologies from Gerald Ford and CIA Director William Colby, though their apologies were limited to informed consent issues concerning Olson's ingestion of LSD. Yeah. On 20th November 2012, the Olson family filed suit against the U.S. federal government for the wrongful death of Frank Olson. The case was dismissed in July 2013, due in part to the 1976 settlement between the family and government. In the decision dismissing the suit, U.S. District Judge James Bosworth wrote, "While the court must limit its analysis to the four corners of the complaint, the skeptical reader may wish to know that the public record supports many of the allegations in the family's suit, far-fetched as they may sound." Yep, here it is. In 2010, book by H.P. Albarelli Jr. alleged that the 1951 Point Saint-Esprit mass poisoning was part of MK Delta, that Olson was involved in that event, and he eventually was murdered by the CIA. However, academic sources attribute the incident to ergot poisoning through a local bakery. Legal issues involving informed consent. Well, I don't want to go into informed consent. I kind of know what that is. It's not really interesting to me right now, but, you know, informed consent is basically you have to know what you're doing, right? Notable people. Experimenters. Harold Alexander Aronson was an American physician, remembered as an early advocate of therapeutic LSD. He played a significant role in CIA's MKUltra program. Donald Ewan, that's the, yeah, that was that guy. Sidney Gottlieb, the director, right? Yeah, was an American chemist and spy master who headed the Central Intelligence Agency's 50s and 60s assassination attempts. Harris Isabel, I don't remember reading that one. Harris Isabel was an American pharmacologist and the director of research for the NIMH Addiction Research Center at the Public Health Service Hospital in Lexington, Kentucky from 1945 to 1963. He did extensive research on the physical and psychological effects. So that was that guy that experimented on some dude in Kentucky for 3 months. Martin Theodore Orne was a professor of psychiatry and psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. Orne is best known for his pioneering research into demand characteristics, illustrating the weakness of informing participants that they are taking part in. Illustrating the weakness of informing participants, meaning that if they know, they're going to skew the extent. And I guess to that point, you know, it goes to the point, you know, I guess this is, you know, the question of like double-blind experiments, right? You know, if you know you're being experimented on, you know, to what point do you know that's occurring? Are you skewing the results, right? It just maybe not even intentionally, maybe so, you know, subconsciously you are skewing the results of an experiment, just not intentionally. You know, not saying that, you know, you shouldn't know if you're being dosed with an illicit substance, just it's a question, right? Louis Joylin West was an American psychiatrist involved in the public sphere. In 1954, at the age of 29, and with no previous 10-year appointment, he gave him a full professor and chair of psychiatry at the University of Oklahoma College of Medicine. Documented subjects. Oh man. American poet Allen Ginsberg first took LSD in an experiment on Stanford University campus, where he could listen to records of his choice. He chose Gertrude Stein reading, a Tibetan mandala, and Richard Wagner. He said the experience resulted in a slight paranoia that hung on all my acid experiences through the mid-1960s until I learned from meditation how to disperse that. He became an outspoken advocate for psychedelics in the 1960s, and after hearing suspicions that the experiments was CIA funded, he wrote, "Am I, Allen Ginsberg, the product of the CIA's lamentable, ill-advised, or triumphantly successful experiments in mind control?" Ken Casey, I guess, author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, is said to have volunteered for MKUltra experiments involving LSD and other psychedelic drugs at the VA hospital in Menlo Park while he was a student at a nearby Stanford University. Casey's experiences while under the influence of LSD inspired him to promote the drug outside the context of the MKUltra experiments, which influenced the early development of hippie culture. Damn hippies. Robert Hunter was an American lyricist, singer, songwriter, translator, and poet, best known for his association with Jerry Garcia in the Grateful Dead. Along with Casey, Hunter was said to be an early volunteer MKUltra test subject at Stanford University. Again, Stanford test subjects were paid to take LSD, psilocybin, and mescaline and report on their experiences. These experiences were creatively formative for Hunter. Sit back, picture yourself swooping up a shell of purple with foam crests of crystal drops, soft nigh they fall onto the sea of morning, creep very softly mist. and then sort of cascade, tinkly bell-like. Must I take you by the hand ever so slowly? Type, and then conglomerate suddenly into a peal of silver, vibrant, uncomprehendingly, blood-sendingly, joyously resounding bells. By my faith, if this be insanity, then for the love of God, permit me to remain insane. Is that a lyric? 105. Nope. Just a long, strange trip. The inside history of the Grateful Dead. Just a book from the Grateful Dead. Alleged subjects. Okay. These alleged subjects. Mobster James Whitey Bulger allegedly had been subjected to weekly injections of LSD and subsequent testing while in prison in Atlanta. 1957. Ted Kaczynski, an American domestic terrorist known as the Unabomber, was said to be a subject of a voluntary psychological study alleged by some sources to have been part of MK Ultra. As a sophomore at Harvard. It was Harvard, not at Oh, interesting. Double blind. Thank you, JD. Double blind also means the doctors don't know who got the placebos. Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Doctors could subconsciously maybe interpret data as well as the patients, right? I'm not saying I'm advocating for it or anything. It's just an interesting, to what extent does someone, either a doctor or a patient, know they are taking a medication, for example, a medication, and subconsciously, alter those results, just because they know they're taking something, which is to the benefit of possibly a double blind, right? Just an interesting conversation piece, I guess. Ted Kaczynski, an American domestic terrorist known as the Unabomber, right, as a sophomore at Harvard. And I was saying there, I thought it was MIT. It was Harvard. Apparently, as a sophomore at Harvard, Kaczynski participated in a study described by author Alston Chase as a purposely brutalizing psychological experiment led by Harvard psychologist Henry Murray. In total, Kaczynski spent 200 hours as part of the study. Man, I really thought he went to MIT. I thought he was a math guy at MIT, but maybe he's Harvard. Lawrence Teeter, the attorney for Sirhan Sirhan, believed that Sirhan was operating under MK Ultra mind control techniques when he assassinated Robert F. Kennedy. Could be. Marshall Applewhite, leader of the Heaven's Gate cult, is reputed to have been an MK Ultra subject while in the Army in the 1950s, and is mentioned as such by Dr. West in recorded video. And here it is, like I was telling before. Charles Manson has been tied to MK Ultra by author Tom O'Neill, beginning with his time in prison when Manson took part in drug-induced psychological experiments run by the federal government. This continued with his ongoing connection to the CIA's free medical clinic in San Francisco once out of prison in 1967. For those of you who don't know, Manson went to prison prior to committing the murders he's famous with in California. So he got out, and I guess he was experimenting on his first stint in prison, is the way I'm reading that. Aftermath. After retiring in 1972, Gottlieb dismissed his entire effort for the CIA's MK Ultra program as useless. The CIA insists that MK Ultra type experiments have been abandoned. They would say that. In popular culture, MK Ultra plays part in many conspiracy theories due to its nature and the destruction of most records. Yeah. Okay. So, what have we learned about this? Well, we went real deep on MK Ultra. This was just the Wikipedia page. I didn't even really get anything else, and it's been an hour and a half. Some of the questions we had, from the chat while we were reading this was psychedelics criminalized because of MK Ultra. Well, it didn't say anything about this. It didn't touch on it in here or anything like that. Maybe that's something we can explore a little bit. Some of the subtopics were Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke, or the same thing. I don't know. The Church Committee and the Rockefeller Committee. Yeah, we learned a little bit about that. Unit 731. Japanese experimentation. Yeah, Operation Paperclip was the importation of, Nazi scientists into the U.S. And I don't necessarily think it was just Nazi scientists. It could have been also Japanese scientists. Sub-Project 54, that was the U.S. Navy trying to erase memories. Awesome. Operation Midnight Climax. That was basically the CIA using CIA safe houses and locations as brothels to basically watch them perform sexual activity with prostitutes and ladies of the night, filming it, and then I assume using it as blackmail, as well as kind of understand things when sometimes they were dosed with LSD too. Shock Doctrine, that's just a book by Naomi Klein, I guess, where they talked about some of the effects of that. And then Project Artichoke, that was something I didn't really get into at all. I think we just did a real deep dive on Project MK Ultra and some of its the cover up, and what they actually tried to do, what the purpose of it was, I guess, supposedly, according to this, they studied mind-altering substances in an effort to combat Soviet sphere of influence. I guess that was the overarching intent. Don't necessarily know if that's its strict purview, but that was its intent. And it led to at least one high-profile death, which the U.S. government had to settle. It led to three investigations. There was the Church Committee, there was the Rockefeller Commission, and then there was those Senate hearings after those 20,000 pages that were supposedly destroyed were uncovered. So at least that it led to presidential orders by Ford, Reagan, and Carter. It opened up doors to ethical concerns. We talked a little bit about double-blind experimentation and its effectiveness. Kind of really eye-opening. One of the things that I would have liked to be able to get into, we didn't have time, is what is the purview of the Church Committee? That may be a really good activity for for maybe going down that road, down the road, another stream when we have time. So I think it's important to understand things like these. Broadly, how does this affect us? This goes to show you that this is, I kind of discussed this earlier, but this shows directly that the U.S. is willing to intentionally experiment on United States citizens. This was directly funded by the CIA, and this potentially the FBI as well. So how does this relate to us today? Well, we have seen, this is opinion now, this isn't fact-based. We have seen how recent developments, how U.S. intelligence and executive branches have been, having a hand in, directing social media. Is that an experiment? I don't know. But just be highly skeptical of, things the U.S. government is doing, regardless of whether you believe in the purpose or not. And I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I think this is a really informative and good stream. Matt, Wes, JD, thank you all for being here. I appreciate you dropping in. If you didn't already, smash follow. We'll do more deep dives like this, when I have time. And we'll take a look at things. JD, good luck with everything y'all are doing, and tell everyone I said hello, and we'll talk soon. One other thing. So in the show notes, I'm gonna post to a WordPress I opened up. I'm just gonna post these show notes and links that I found on MK Ultra that we discussed. These will all be there. It's should be really easy to find. I started it here. It's just a simple WordPress Austin Ads WordPress. I'm just going to post them here in case anybody wants to come back and look at it. I think I'll figure out how to do it on my my YouTube. Like I said, it'll be real simple. Just show notes, just some links. Like you said, all I did was a Word document, some things we want to look at. You can follow up yourself and take a look, and yeah, explore topics deeper. Anyways, oh, wrong screen. So yeah, I started a WordPress here. Like I said, just WordPress.com, Austin Ads, really easy to find. Don't overcomplicate it. And I'll post everything here. I'll post here. That way you can kind of look at it. If you ever want to come back to it. And like I said, it'll try and be in my my YouTube profile. Anyways, I want to say thank you everybody. Appreciate your time. Have a great rest of your day.